Welcome back to the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. Okay, so the difference between the case that I'm going to talk about today and past videos I've done is that all the people involved were already in prison serving time when the crime happened. 2 inmates were sentenced to death for killing another inmate. One of those inmates sentenced to death is Anibal Canales Jr., who is scheduled for execution on March 29th of this year for the murder of a prison inmate named Gary Dickerson. The other inmate sentenced to death, Canales' accomplice in the murder, is 48-year-old William Speer, who at the time of the prison murder in 1997 was serving a life sentence for killing a man when he was 16 years old. William Speer has already exhausted all his appeals at the state level, but at this time there is no scheduled execution for him. Anibal Canales was born in the state of Illinois on December 1st, 1964, to Mexican parents that had immigrated to this country. He is now 58 years old. I could go on forever from everything I've read about all the abuse and misery that Canales had suffered while growing up, but from all the comments I've seen here in the past, I know that most of you don't care about that. Because, as many of you have stated, millions of people grow up in similar conditions and don't turn into murderers. So I will leave that out. Anibal Canales has been in and out of jail or prison since he was 18 years old, beginning when he stole an income tax check that arrived in the mail for his stepfather and he cashed it. That was actually a federal crime, and he was sent to federal prison, but was later released. Canales was later sentenced for other crimes over the years that included theft and sexual assault. At the sentencing phase of the murder trial for Anibal Canales, one of his sexual assault victims testified that Canales had approached her in a parking lot, told her that he was a police officer and that she was under arrest. He then drove her into the woods and raped her. In 1993, while incarcerated, Anibal Canales suffered a heart attack and was placed on medication. It has been said that Anibal Canales is also a very talented artist, and he himself says that he has been drawing since he was a child. Aside from his criminal activity, it appears to be his biggest passion in life. At some point, Canales became a member of a gang called the Latin Kings. After violating his parole in 1995 because of another sexual assault, Canales was sent to the Telford Unit Prison in the city of New Boston in Texas. When a prison gang at Telford Unit that called themselves the Texas Syndicate learned that Canales was doing time for sexual assaults, something very much frowned upon by other prisoners, and that Canales had been a member of the Latin Kings, a gang despised by the Texas Syndicate, leaders of that group ordered Canales to be killed. That's when a prisoner named Bruce Richards, the leader of another prison gang called the Texas Mafia, made Anibal Canales a member of the Texas Mafia and protected him by negotiating a deal with the Texas Syndicate to drop the order to have Canales killed. According to some reports, this now means that Anibal Canales owes Bruce Richards his life. Of course, all the details of exactly what happened leading up to the murder of inmate Gary Dickerson might never be known by anyone, because most of these stories are coming from other prisoners, what other inmates have disclosed, including Anibal Canales. But the story put together seems to go something like this. The victim in this case, Gary Dickerson, was handed $20 in cash by someone from one of the other prison gangs, and he was asked to go buy some tobacco and bring it back to them. Now, apparently, cash money is a contraband in prison. Prison guards caught Gary Dickerson with the money and confiscated it from him. When Gary Dickerson informed the gang that the money was confiscated, they told Dickerson that he needed to come up with the money or the tobacco, or a hit will be ordered to take his life. According to some reports, that's when Dickerson then blackmailed some gang members by saying something to the effect of that if anyone tries anything, he was going to report to prison authorities his knowledge about a large shipment of contraband tobacco, 240 packs of bugler tobacco, that the gang, as well as the Texas Mafia, was about to receive. Reports state that Gary Dickerson was warned that nothing better happened to that tobacco delivery. An inmate named James Baker would later say that he had arranged for an order of 240 packs of bugler tobacco to be delivered to the Telford Unit, and that the Texas Mafia was going to get 130 packs from that delivery. Prison officials reported that on July 2nd, 1997, 2 inmates were caught picking up 240 packs of bugler tobacco and hiding the tobacco in the Telford Unit horse barn. Yes, there is a horse barn at the prison. According to one site, Telford Unit provides work opportunities for inmates that include farming, working with horses, cows, and in kennels. When Gary Dickerson found out that the tobacco was discovered by prison authorities, he asked them for protective custody, because surely the Texas Mafia prison gang was going to think that he snitched and he will be killed. Dickerson was apparently provided protection by the prison for a time, and word was sent to the gang leaders by prison officials that Gary Dickerson had nothing to do with their discovery of the illegal tobacco delivery that was confiscated. Sometime later, Gary Dickerson was released back into the general population and back to his cell that he shared with another inmate named Tim Rice. On July 11, 1997, with Anibal Canales now 2 years into his 15-year sentence, sometime about 8:45 in the evening, inmates Jesse Barnes, Michael Constantine, Anibal Canales, and William Speer, all members of the Texas Mafia, were seen gathered near the cell of Gary Dickerson and Tim Rice, but Tim Rice was out in the recreation yard at that time. Meanwhile, an inmate named Richard Driver Jr. went to Gary Dickerson's cell to sell him 6 hand-rolled cigarettes in exchange for magazines. According to Richard Driver, Michael Constantine later asked him to go back there again and lure Dickerson out of his cell over to where the group was gathered. But Driver refused, knowing full well what was going to happen, and he didn't want to be a part of it. Richard Driver stated that he later saw the victim, Gary Dickerson, with William Speer and Anibal Canales go into Dickerson's cell. Richard Driver said he also saw an inmate named Stephen Canida standing right beside his cell door, which was beside Gary Dickerson's cell. That inmate, Stephen Canida, would say that Gary Dickerson had stopped by his cell to pick up some books and that he was met outside his cell by William Speer. Stephen Canida said that he saw William Speer go with Gary Dickerson into Dickerson's cell, and that a few moments later, Anibal Canales also entered that cell and shut the door behind him. Stephen Canida said he could see into the cell as Anibal Canales squatted down to smoke, and that suddenly the lights went out in the cell. He said that a short time later, Anibal Canales came out of the cell and walked past his cell where he had the door wide open, and Canales went down the stairs. Canita said that a few moments later, William Speer had walked out of Gary Dickerson's cell. Canita saw him shut the door and engage the lock on it, and had thought of that as very strange. Stephen Canita said that William Speer then walked past his wide open door and went down the stairs. An inmate named Edwin Hinson told prison officials that right about that time he saw Anibal Canales and William Speer going down the stairs from the area of Gary Dickerson's cell. Yet another inmate named Johnny Talbert told investigators that he saw William Speer and Anibal Canales enter the cell of Gary Dickerson, and that at one point, inmate Jesse Barnes, one of the 4 Texas Mafia members that were gathered together earlier, had called out to William Speer to let him know that it looks like a guard might be coming into the area. Stephen Canita, in the cell beside Gary Dickerson, would say that the next person he saw go into Gary Dickerson's cell after Anibal Canales and William Speer had left was Gary Dickerson's cellmate, Tim Rice, who, upon his arrival, found the lights off and the lock on and had to call out to the prison guard to unlock the door. And that moments later, Tim Rice came back out of the cell and was hollering for guards again, saying something is wrong with Gary Dickerson and that he thinks Dickerson is dead. That cellmate, Tim Rice, had said that upon entering the cell and turning on the lights, he saw Gary Dickerson lying down on his top bunk. But what he found very strange was that Dickerson was lying down in the opposite direction of how he always sleeps. His feet were where his head should be, and vice versa. He said he walked up to him and could tell that Dickerson was dead. He called out to the guards. The guards called the nurse who arrived at the cell and confirmed that Dickerson was gone. The nurse also said that Dickerson appears to have died of natural causes, possibly heart failure. Sometime later, however, a medical examiner performed an autopsy on Gary Dickerson and informed prison officials that Dickerson had died of strangulation. The cause of death was homicide. An inmate named Kim Hudson Taylor told investigators that he overheard on the following day after the murder when Anibal Canales had said to William Speer, "It felt good to kill that old son of a b." The leader of the Texas Mafia, Bruce Richards, remember that he took on Anibal Canales Jr. as a member of the Texas Mafia and negotiated protection for him from the Texas Syndicate. According to the reports, he had said, if he, Canales, refused to do what I told him, I would have sent him back to the Texas Syndicate and he would be killed. Attorneys for Anibal Canales and those defending him have made a big deal about how several prisoners, many that later testified against Canales, were ordered to scrub and wash down the cell that Gary Dickerson was killed in soon after the body was removed because Dickerson had apparently released bodily fluids and excrement, dirtying up the cell, and that it was okay to clean the cell because the nurse had declared that Dickerson died from natural causes. Thus, inmates, according to those defending Canales, ended up erasing possible physical evidence that may have included DNA, fingerprints, or fibers linking the crime to the true killers. These inmates at the prison were apparently all over the place, freely entering the cells whenever they wanted. How is DNA, fingerprints, or fibers going to be used to accuse anyone? Those defending Canales also wanted to be known that all of the inmates that testified against him were offered various benefits, incentives, and special deals for their cooperation with the investigation to prove that Canales and Speer committed the crime, thus implying that all these convicts are a bunch of liars and that they can't be trusted or believed. Once again, yes, all this is an accumulation of information provided by prison inmates, convicted criminals, and one must wonder how much credibility there is in what prison inmates testify about. While we do have a slew of inmates saying pretty much the same thing, which creates a damning situation for Anibal Canales, can they all be believed? But maybe a jury didn't put too much stock into what the inmates were saying about how they saw Anibal Canales and William Speer enter Gary Dickerson's cell, and minutes later Dickerson was found dead. Because the jury in this case had something else. They had a letter written by Anibal Canales that was supposed to get passed on to a Texas mafia buddy in the prison. But that letter got intercepted and would later end up in the hands of the prosecution trying the case against Anibal Canales. In that letter, Anibal Canales had written the following: "Dirty lit the smoke and we smoked." Dirty was the nickname for Gary Dickerson. "When the last hit was took, he was down by the vent on his knee and Puff behind and me at the door." Puff is the nickname for William Speer. "Puff put the hold on him and I grabbed his arms. It went smooth. He lost consciousness right away and struggled for a little bit. I took the time to inform him who we were and why he's going to die. Puff told him, 'Don't even F with the Texas Mafia in hell. Ha ha ha.' Anyway, we made sure the D sucker was dead and I declared the hit complete. We put his poop smelling behind in the top bunk and went quietly out the door. I went to the yard with minutes to spare." This letter would be entered into evidence at trial. Canales and his lawyers argued that the Texas Mafia had ordered Canales to write that letter as a way to take the heat off the real killers, and that he didn't have to worry about it because, as the Texas Mafia told him, he, Canales, has an ironclad alibi during the time of the murder. Canales said that he was told how prosecutors will go after him, but then lose the case because he has that ironclad alibi. According to this explanation, this would mean that Anibal Canales had written the letter expecting it to be intercepted, expecting to be charged with murder, and then found not guilty because he can prove that he has an alibi, and thus provide this as a favor to the real killers. But that he didn't kill anyone, and to this day continues to say that he didn't kill Gary Dickerson. The prosecution responded in its closing arguments by asking if there was any other way for Anibal Canales to have explained this letter, implying that the best he could come up with was that he was forced or tricked into writing it, because Canales can't deny that he wrote the letter. It has his known handwriting, and his fingerprints were lifted from the paper. So the best explanation he could come up with was that he was tricked into writing it. Death penalty opponents and an anti-death penalty group have published a page on a website called the Death Row Soul Collective that includes a message from Anibal Canales that, even though Canales calls it in a nutshell, the message is quite lengthy. detailing all the reasons why he is not guilty of having killed Gary Dickerson. The group that published the letter referred to it as a clemency letter. At no point in this message from Anibal Canales, nowhere in this message, does he mention the letter that he wrote to another gang member about how he had declared the hit complete soon after the murder was committed. In that message, he offers no explanation as to why he wrote that letter. Please remember to subscribe for more death row and upcoming execution stories. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.